Hello and welcome to The Price of Football, the show that looks at the money behind the beautiful game with me, Kevin Day, and Liverpool University's Kieran Maguire. Kieran, how are you on this horrible morning?
It's very hot indeed. So yeah, I got up extra early to take Finley for a walk because he doesn't like chasing squirrels when it's too hot. But yeah, well, it won't last. It won't last. It's a bit like the way that you feel about Brighton's start to the season.
Yeah, it's not that good. You're only a point above us. Not that good. Yeah, I'm currently watching Smudge, bless her, who she's trying to adjust herself so that her head, which is mainly black fur, is in the shade, and her tummy, which is mainly white fur, is in the sun. And she's not having much success. Nobody likes chasing squirrels in the hot weather, Kieran. It's just no one's got the energy for it, have they? But the squirrels know it. The squirrels have been taunting her. It's Newsday, Kieran. There aren't that many news stories compared to the last couple of weeks, but a couple of them are very big. Especially the first one, the story coming out of Manchester United, which has really upset Gary Neville.
Yes, this was a story that was broken by Nick Harris and Alex Miller at the Mail on Sunday, effectively on Saturday night. And it indicated that the Glazers were thinking of pulling out of selling the club because the asking price that they felt was appropriate was £10 billion. And nobody's seen that quoted before. I think the offers which had been discussed and were being mooted by Sheikh Jassim and Jim Ratcliffe were in the region of £5.5 billion. So quite a long way away from this price, which has come from nowhere. And that provoked a pretty hostile reaction from the likes of Gary Neville, who is keen to see the club sold, and of course a significant amount of the Manchester United fan base. Where they get this figure of £10 billion from is somewhere which I can't fathom out. I like a spreadsheet, as you know, and I like crunching numbers because I'm a dweeb. But under the Glazers, Manchester United have had pre-tax losses of £320 million over 18 years. So if you can't make a profit in 18 years, how can you persuade somebody to pay £10 billion for that particular business? So that just seems very odd. And then things start to get a little bit, I wouldn't say Machiavellian, but the credibility that the story has had, and Nick Harris, who I know Nick, I think you know Nick as well. We both had conversations. He's from the investigative journalist side of things, and his website Sporting Intel is somewhere which I visit quite regularly for data and other information. So he's not a clickbaity type of journalist. And as he said, we've approached Manchester United for clarification, for a comment. We've approached the Rain Group. We've approached Sheikh Jassim and Jim Ratcliffe, and we're getting nothing from nobody to confirm this story. So we've decided to run it. We believe our sources are good. But Manchester United is a company that is quoted on the New York Stock Exchange. And the reaction of the stock exchange was to immediately wipe $700 million off the value of Manchester United shares. And the reason for that is a lot of the reason why the share price is so high is people have bought the shares on a speculative basis with a view to trying to flip them and sell them at a profit, presumably to Jim Ratcliffe or Sheikh Jassim. If this news has any legs, I think we could see a further substantial reduction in the price unless something more crystallized comes out of one of these key parties. So it's messy. People will have lost money on the back of this. Some people will have made money. But, if anybody that's watched Trading Places, you know that you can sell short on this type of thing. So it's all very murky, and I think it's further indicative of a club which doesn't seem to know where it's heading in terms of direction.
Our friend Martin Searle, Kieran, who does the little thumbnail reviews each week, is going to be very upset at hearing you say nothing from nobody. You know he's a stickler for the old grammar. Nothing from nobody. What I find odd about this, Kieran, I mean, it's not like a lot of us have had experience of selling a house or selling a car, and somebody will say, well, I'll tell you what, I'll give you £5,000 less than your valuation. The gap between, as you say, this out of the nowhere value of $10 billion or £10 billion and £6 billion, which apparently is as far as Jim Ratcliffe was prepared, is just huge, Kieran. It's not bridgeable, is it? Basically, you can't see anyone suddenly going, oh, I'll tell you what, yeah, I can find that extra £4 billion if that's what you say it's worth. And Jim Ratcliffe is a very respected business person, and you would think that if anybody knew what a fair value for that club was, it would be somebody like him, who you would have trusted to do all the due diligence and research. So has this £10 billion figure come from the club? Is it official, or is this just journalists who have plucked a figure out of the air? Because it's extraordinarily high, even for a club of the size and global reach of Manchester United.
That's right. If you think that Newcastle United was sold for, 305 million, it's effectively saying that Manchester United is worth 30 times the amount of Newcastle. And Manchester United, as you rightly say, it's a global club with a huge fan base, but Newcastle's a pretty decently sized club as well. Chelsea was sold for 2.5 billion, and their property assets are in the swankiest part of swanky London. And to say that Manchester United is therefore worth 4 times the amount of Chelsea, is it worth more? Yeah, I would. My gut reaction is, but that element. As for where this number has come from, I'm sure the people involved who did the report, they wouldn't have signed their name off, because they've got reputations to keep. And as I say, I know Nick, and he's one of the more cautious journalists when it comes to what he's prepared to put his name to. So, and he did give, as we saw with Adam Crafton and his revelations about Manchester United and the group, he did give the club a right of reply. He's been through the proper journalistic channels, and nothing is coming back. This is. It's not insider trading. The club has to go through the right protocols, but you also have to consider, from the point of view of the potential bidders, Jim Ratcliffe and Sheikh Jassim's group will have spent a lot of money on accountants, lawyers, and other professionals in putting together the bids, in doing due diligence, in getting access to the data room and going through it with a fine-tooth comb. And if Manchester United are going to turn around after 11 months and now say, oh, we've just decided to effectively double what we consider to be the asking price, it doesn't look very good. As far as where this £10 billion comes from, I think the only thing that I can think of is Manchester United have seen Barcelona, and this is a separate topic to a certain extent. They've seen Barcelona sell off the media rights. They've seen Barcelona sell off various parts of future revenue streams. And they've worked out, well, if we add up all of those bits of Barcelona, perhaps we're undervaluing Manchester United. But if they have done that, why haven't they done those sums 8 or 9 months ago? If you or I went to look at a house and somebody says it's, well, that's a nice looking house and it's got a for sale sign, and they say it's £1 million and we've only got £500,000 to spend, we just walk away, and you don't take it any further. So I'm not saying it's misrepresentation by the Glazers, because that's probably going a bit too far, but it does seem to be very strange, and it's provoked fury from Manchester United fans.
You did say Chelsea were in the swankiest part of London, didn't you?
I did, yes.
You did, yeah. Good. That's good. Just wanted to clear that up, because the other option would have been correct also. What I don't understand, Kieran, does this, if this £10 billion valuation is correct, have the Glazers slapped that valuation on as an indication that they don't want to sell and they don't think anybody will match that price? And do you think it indicates, as some people are now suggesting, that the Glazers were never serious about selling the club in the first place?
I think they probably were serious about selling the club for the simple reason that they've appointed the Rain Group. So at the end of this exercise, they're going to have to go and pay their professional advisors a substantial amount of money. Where they've got this figure from, yes, I looked at the Barcelona issue. I've been trying to look at other things. Manchester United tries to present itself as a tech company, as an entertainment company. Could it be that we've seen recently, I think in some of the pre-season friendlies, where players have had cameras in their shirts? Now, if you crunch the numbers, would you be willing to be Marcus Rashford or Bruno Fernandes for 90 minutes and pay £5 for the privilege, looking at their eye view? Could we use artificial intelligence and virtual reality to bring Old Trafford to the millions of fans that Manchester United do have, and who perhaps are willing to pay for the privilege of that? In which case, a reset of the valuation is possible. Or is that going to be exactly the same as what we saw with 3D TV when Sky introduced that probably about 10, 15 years ago, and there's a big hoo-ha about it at the time. And when we sat around and we got the 3D experience, and you felt a bit nauseous after about 10 minutes and said, that sounds like a good idea, but never again. So there must be something behind these numbers, trying to get a definitive value. So I've looked at the historical numbers. There's no indication of any way of justifying this price.
I'm not saying it's related to the Glazers and the ownership issue, but it does seem to be a club that's slightly unsettled at the moment with things happening. Jadon Sancho publicly disagreeing with the manager, various other issues. They haven't started the season as well as their fans would have expected. It doesn't give the aura of a happy club, does it?
No. I mean, we've always said that to be successful, you have to have everybody rowing in the same direction. And that's to punch at your weight and above. I think it could be argued that Manchester United have punched below their weight over the course of the last decade since Sir Alex Ferguson has retired. And therefore, you've got to look at the higher levels of the club. And I know people are probably bored of me saying this, but it doesn't matter what the business is. It always comes down to resources, opportunities, and decision making. Manchester United have got the resources. They've got the fan base, they've got the big stadium, they've got the TV deals, they've got the sponsorship deals, they've got the opportunities because they are Manchester United. They're in the Champions League, they're in the Premier League. They're in many countries. So under those circumstances, Manchester United have got a competitive advantage against probably the rest of the Premier League. Why are they not winning things? It can only be due to the quality of the decisions being made. And this isn't a football show, so there's 1,001 football shows we can say, well, they shouldn't have signed this player or appointed that manager or appointed Ed Woodward, but it's something to do with the people making the decisions.
It's always been a dream of mine, Kieran, to watch the university boat race and see somebody rowing in the wrong direction. And also to when they throw the little fella in at the end, to throw him landwards rather than wetwards. We sometimes give the impression, Kieran, I think on this show, that we disapprove of American ownership. We don't. We disagree with American ownership with the wrong intention. But Norwich City look like they might be in for even more American ownership in the near future.
Yes, a gentleman called Mark Attanasio, who owns the Milwaukee Brewers back in the good old US of A, did build up a minority stake in Norwich City last year. I think he currently owns around 21%. Now, there is a proposal, and there is going to be a vote taking place amongst all of Norwich City's small shareholders. So Mark Attanasio will not be able to vote on this, and Delia Smith will not be able to vote on this, with regards to a deal which will mean that Mark Attanasio and Delia will become joint in terms of the number of shares that they own between them. It's effectively it's going to be a sort of an entente cordiale, a non-aggression pact between the two parties, which will take us to, I think it's January 2026. So that's the vote which is being put before the shareholders of Norwich City. Now, if that vote is rejected by the shareholders, where does this leave Mark Attanasio? It looks as if Norwich City have some loans which are at a significant, I think they're at a double-digit rate of interest. Those loans potentially could be called in because he has shares which effectively pay some sort of interest. As for the position of Delia Smith, you and I, we are both Delia fans. You've been there for Match of the Day purposes, and you've been on the boardroom and I think the graceful way in which the club is run. Mm-hmm. Myself, as a former undergraduate student who went to university with a Delia's cookbook and a saucepan, I wouldn't be alive was it not for Delia Smith. I certainly wouldn't be 6'3" because I was very short, but I kept growing at university. So, without being too rude, Delia is now in her 80s. In terms of succession, she doesn't have any children. She does have a nephew who's a director on the board, but presumably she's got to make some form of decision with regards to sort of the long-term destination of her shares. Where does this leave Norwich City? Yeah, it's an interesting one because there is no fan representation on the board, and I think that's something which Norwich potentially could address going forwards. But it is a big vote. I think it probably will go through because the consequences of it's not going through is that if Mark Attanasio is not in a position to put in money through not being able to buy shares, it makes you wonder who will. And now, is he going to be a good owner or a bad owner? We've had people from not too far from Norwich on the show from the US, sort of expressing their views with regards to how they see Ipswich have had an uptick. There's no doubt about it since the takeover. So it's a big vote. It's a big decision. Norwich probably want to increase the amount of money they spend on infrastructure. Delia's not in a position to be able to do that, because her wealth, whilst high by our standards, it isn't going to move the dial in terms of sticking another 5,000 seats on Carrow Road. So we wait and see.
Two quick questions off the back of that, Kieran. Firstly, do we know when the vote's happening? And secondly, if Mark Attanasio is unable to increase his stake in Norwich City, do you think he's likely to walk away, or do you think he'll stay with the limited number of shares that he has?
Well, the vote takes place on the 2nd of October.
Okay, also a while away yet still, yeah.
Yeah, so it will allow... it will allow presumably people to make a pitch and for views to be heard. My gut reaction is I think the minority shareholders are more likely to take it than not take it. But that's an individual decision for individual shareholders to make. If he's not able to progress, what's the point of owning 21% of Norwich City if your ambition is to own own a Premier League football club? And from Mark Attanasio's position, he wants that to be Norwich City. He wants them to get promoted and to be that owner. I suspect he will be looking for an exit route, and he'll be calling in any debts which are due to him and any preferential shares which potentially could cause cash issues as far as the club is concerned.
I'm intrigued by this next story, Kieran, and I'm looking forward to hearing what the explanation is. But there's been an unlikely financial beneficiary from Rangers' exit from the Champions League.
Yes, so Rangers were in the qualifiers for the Champions League, and they lost, and it was it's a poor performance. Again, we're not going to focus on the football side of things, but they got a bit of a drubbing. So therefore, they dropped down to the Europa League. And the way that UEFA distribute money is that they put it into a series of pots. Now, one of those pots is based on where you finish in the table. One of those pots is based on what UEFA refer to as their 10-year coefficient, and so on. But one of those pots is also linked to the amount of money the domestic broadcaster is prepared to pay for Champions League rights. Now, in the case of the UK, we've got BT, who have the rights, which clearly has got the English teams and the SPFL clubs, and so on. That money would normally be split equally between the participating teams, or it might be split 60-40, I think, if you've got two teams and you give slightly more money to the team that's finishing first as opposed to second in the SPFL. With Celtic qualifying for the Champions League by right through winning the SPFL last season, and Rangers having to go through the qualification rounds, Rangers failing to get to the Champions League means that instead of Celtic getting, I think it was 50 to 60% of that pot of money, they're now going to get 100%. That's worth £2.5 million. So Celtic fans are always quite happy to see Rangers have a poor result, but they have been major beneficiaries of Rangers' failure to progress into the knockout rounds, into the group stages of the Champions League. And that's going to, I think, further increase the gap between the two clubs, which, in a league where you don't expect anything other than one of those two clubs to win, has got to be a significant benefit to Celtic.
For anyone who has a phobia about the dentist, I can only apologise about the drilling coming from next door. It must be really upsetting some of the more scaredy cat people out there. Dorking Wanderers, Kieran, are a club that we've spoken to the owner of. He's the owner, the manager, the kit man, the bus driver, pretty much. A club who were essentially a Sunday League team not that long ago, but financially look like they've had a big injection.
Yes, so Dorking Wanderers, whose story about bringing a club from the park football as far as they have done into the National League, I think that's enough to inspire people to write a book about perhaps a fictional team who could even go even further. I'd buy such a book. I'd buy such a book, especially if it was coming out on October the 12th, Kevin. I don't know about you.
Well, I'm hoping I don't have to buy it, Kieran. I'd be annoyed if I have to buy it. Well, right. We should at least get one free copy each, Kieran.
But Dorking have now reached the stage where, as you progress through the leagues, you have to spend more and more money on facilities and upgrades, and there are minimum standards expected. And they've now reached the stage where they say, well, we've done very well in terms of our commercial deals and getting people to come to matches and so on, but we're going to give fans the opportunity to contribute as well. So they've used sort of a crowdfunding organisation called Seeders, which stands for seed capital. It's allowing individuals to contribute towards something that they like. And they've raised over £300,000 from, I think it's 725 investors. I think they're looking in total to spend around about 2 million, but some of this was going to come from fans, some of this was going to come from other sources, to allow Dorking to make further progress as far as they're concerned, to make sure that they are next step ready as far as their progress is concerned. And they've gone through this particular. It's a lot easier to write it in a few few paragraphs in a few pages than actually raise the money, and that's the advantage of a work of fiction, of course. But fair play to them. It clearly is a club with ambition, and they're taking this route.
Well, also the other advantage of the work of fiction, Kieran, is you know exactly what's going to happen. There's none of that worry. Will we get into Europe? Yes, we will, because I'm writing the book. Therefore, we will get into it. And Kieran's given me the financial wherewithal to make sure we do. And Guy's saving loads. Even in the fictional world, Guy saves loads of money somehow. He's tight with money. Even in I could have turned him into anything, but I turned him into producer guy. Now, the chances are, Kieran, if you live in a major European city, you might be getting a visit from some Saudi Arabians soon, although I suspect they might keep out of Liverpool for the next couple of weeks. But they're on a major cozy up campaign, aren't they?
Yes, there's no doubt that under Mohammed bin Salman's broader proposals for Saudi Arabia, um, the success of the 2022 World Cup as a televisual spectacle, you could argue that we're not talking about the Qatari Professional League anymore. We weren't talking a bit before the tournament. Saudi Arabia wants to host the World Cup. It's hosted some other sort of A-grade events as far as world sport is concerned, and it's going to try to pitch. It's got closer relations with the African countries, and now I think there's going to be effectively a charm offensive with regards to getting support. Ideally, perhaps we'll see a European bid in 2030, and Saudi will say, well, we won't go up against that, and in return, and there's always been this element of sort of of trading taking place historically, that Saudi Arabia is looking to pitch for the 2034 World Cup. Although part of the countries pitching for 2030 includes Spain, and given the chaos that is currently existing at the top echelons of Spanish football at present, it could be argued that they might feel that they need to get their house in order before they can make such a significant acquisition, which could actually open the door for Saudi Arabia to host in 2030. But does it have the money to do it? Yes. Does it have the influence to do that? I think what we're seeing is now, it was mooted, was that this was one of the reasons why there were no clubs from the Saudi Pro League willing to take Mason Greenwood on loan or to sign him, because the broader metrics of wanting to host the FIFA World Cup were so much that they would much rather get a positive response from that than being seen to recruit Greenwood, who comes with issues and baggage, as we've seen at Getafe already.
The concept of sports washing, Kieran, is an interesting one, because at the moment it seems to be having, certainly for fans of football clubs, it seems to be having the opposite effect of what the Saudi Arabian government would want. Because for whatever reasons, cultural, financial, there's an incredible amount of suspicion from English football fans towards Saudi Arabia, whether it's because they're doing what we've traditionally done and used our money to lure the best players away, whether it is cultural. But, there was a visit from a Saudi Arabian delegation to Selhurst Park last week for a fact-finding mission, apparently. Well, what facts they would, how to run a mid-table club. And
finding Selhurst Park will be an achievement.
How many more times do I have to say to people, if you live around here, it's just down the road. It's a piece of piss to find Selhurst Park if you live here.
You do Google Maps Riyadh to Selhurst.
Yeah, that'd be an expensive Uber, wouldn't it? But quite a lot of the Palace fan base, the HF, for example, did their nut and issued a public statement saying they better not be here to talk about investing in the club. So it's kind of they have a lot of work to do, don't they? I mean, obviously, if you're the head of a European FA, you might be more happy to see the Saudis than the fans are in those countries. But it's interesting how, at the moment, their sport washing doesn't seem to be having the right effects, certainly at a lower level of football.
Yes, I've always got slight reservations with regards to the concept of sports washing, because if I was one of the richest countries in the world on a per head of population basis, which effectively is the case for a country such as Saudi Arabia because of its natural resources, would I be seeking approval from the UK, from France, from the USA? Yeah, because I've got the oil. So those countries need Saudi, especially given the issues that we currently have with regards to Russia and its natural resources. So it doesn't need to host the World Cup in order to get approval, or because even a quick meeting with anybody who's sort of involved in marketing or PR will say, this is going to bring you a lot of attention. And this is the type of attention it's going to bring, and it's not going to be positive. And we saw that with regards to what happened in Qatar and the 2022 World Cup. So, yeah, in Saudi Arabia, it's going to be more of the same. So I think there are broader issues that they want it because it's an opportunity to show off the facilities of the country, to use as a networking exercise, to sign off contracts for other industries as well. I don't think it needs approval of Western football fans.
Our next story, Kieran, comes from France, but it could possibly have implications for my club, Crystal Palace.
This is right. John Textor, who is a part owner of Crystal Palace, became the majority shareholder in Lyon last December. Now, the previous president, a gentleman called Jean-Michel Aulas,
very good.
He'd been there for 36 years. He'd transformed Lyon. It's got a 59,000 capacity stadium. It had been dominant before PSG arrived with the support of Qatari money. It was certainly one of the biggest players in French football. It's always been very substantial as far as European women's football is concerned as well. And it looks as if there's been some form of fallout between him and John Textor to such an extent that he's now managed to go to a court and to get 14.5 million euros frozen in terms of the shares which were bought, shares which were issued by the club. He wants some of his money back, and it does indicate that his relationship with Textor appears to be going in a negative format. What are the implications for Crystal Palace? Well, you're much closer to this particular part of the story than I am, but trying to work out Textor's ambitions for Palace, and I've read his interviews in The Athletic and elsewhere where he says it's all these things are independent, just makes you feel slightly uneasy. Has he overreached himself? What is his grand vision? Where does he expect to be in 5 years' time with regards to his multi-club ownership model, and so on? So it's messy. It's not good. Lyon have had a poor start to the season. Their fans are quite grumpy as a result of that. And when fans are grumpy, they tend to turn their attention to the manager, the players, and the owner.
Well, I mean, Textor stated in a recent interview that his biggest mistake was not buying Crystal Palace 100%, but that he had interest in buying Benfica at the same time, and it turned out he couldn't afford both. And he's making lots of noises about owning 20% of the club and having no percent influence. But you can only be worried as a football fan when one of your owners is having financial troubles at another club. This idea of 14.5 million euros being frozen, Kieran, so that means that of the money, I can't quite get my head around the concept. So of the money that Lyon have in the bank, 14.5 million of it no longer counts. It can't be used because, I mean, what if that money was put into the club by Textor?
Right. My understanding, and I might have got this wrong, is what's happened was that in order to buy his share in Lyon Football Club issued shares to Textor, and in response, Textor gave money to the club. So what Jean-Michel Aulas has done is said, well, some of that money's still around. I'm going to have that ring fenced. It cannot be used for other projects. It cannot be used to pay the wages. It cannot be used to pay the rent and so on. Effectively putting pressure back onto Textor to resolve what would appear to be some form of dispute between the two parties. And it's it's a negotiation tactic. You play your cards appropriately, and if you've got if you've got a bit of muscle to bring into the equation, that's the approach which has been taken here.
I believe Jean-Michel Aulas has also gone to court to try and get a transfer embargo on Lyon as well. So this is a story that's only going to get messier. And talking of messy stories, Kieran, our penultimate story is again something we speak about in the book, which is nefarious ways that people try and get hold of broadcasting contracts. So this news coming out of America is very interesting, news coming from the American court.
Yes, this is in respect of a gentleman called Hernan Lopez, who used to work for Fox Sports. Now, the allegation that was made and the charges of which he was found guilty a few months ago was in respect to bribing officials, money laundering, and wire fraud. I've never quite understood what wire fraud is, yeah, but I presume it's sending money.
I know what it was when I was working as a builder. It was telling people that this wire was genuine copper. That's when it was nothing of the sort. I'm going to have to charge you all for this wire, genuine copper. This wire, love.
So he was found guilty, I think, in March or April, and this is in respect to using these methods to generate the rights, I think partly for the FIFA World Cup, but also for the Copa Libertadores, which is the South American equivalent of the Euros. And on the basis of that, Fox managed to get those rights. Now, Fox has not been charged. It is against the individual. What we now have seen is that following a Supreme Court ruling, which has effectively said, and I'm not going to get too bogged down in the legal issues here, because it's we're finance and not law, and B, we are pub lawyers at most. A US Supreme Court, and clearly there have been changes in the Supreme Court when Donald Trump was there, so that there is now sort of majority in what you might call the conservative element of legal counsel. That the US cannot effectively get involved in what it considers to be international disputes relating to other countries. So as this relates to FIFA, which is based in Switzerland, and the South American championships, which again, nothing to do with the US, even though it involved a US company, and that was the vehicle which was used, it's saying, we think that's outside our statute. That's outside our box. And a local judge has, on the basis of that, has found out that Hernan Lopez is now going to be deemed to be innocent of the charges. Where this will involve future bids for football rights, which are lucrative, I think it was interesting that the US and the FBI effectively took FIFA on with regards to how it had been operating historically. And yeah, there's a lot of heads have rolled at FIFA following the award of both the Russia 2018 and the Qatar 22 World Cup. So that's where we are. So I'm not saying it's carte blanche if you want to bribe football officials, because it's wrong. But you're not going to be able to. The authorities are not going to be able to use the US courts as a means of taking this up.
I'm glad you said it's wrong there, Kieran. The producer guy would have been very upset if you didn't add that little caveat. It's wrong. Bribing. Don't go bribing officials. It must have been nice, Kieran, for a US court to have a half-hour Trump-free window. It's just
Yes.
This is an interesting change. We've got just some international bribery. Are you sure that's not true? Anyway. As we speak, Kieran, our final story, the Saudi Arabian transfer window is still open, so there's probably a nervous couple of days ahead for Liverpool fans as Mo Salah debates his future. But his commercial company has just published its accounts, Kieran.
Yes, and we've just seen Jordan Henderson have what can only be described as a car crash of an interview with the Athletic and Adam Crafton, who we praised in relation to his Manchester United investigative. He did one with David Ornstein, and I think it's fair to say that Jordan Henderson has not come out of this particularly well.
Yeah.
In exactly the same way as the LIV golfers who were saying, no, nothing to do with money.
Yeah.
Well, I've got Jordan Henderson's accounts on his companies, of course, because that's what I do. He already has substantial amounts of money. But for those Liverpool fans thinking, well, do we think that Mo Salah needs the cash? If you go to the accounts of Salah UK Commercial, which is his company which deals, I think, with his intellectual property and so on, that produced its accounts last week. And looking here, it's got £20,182,000 in the bank.
Wow.
So he probably doesn't need the cash either. Now, if he makes that decision, if Liverpool make that decision, that's a separate issue. But I think for people to say that he needs the money is probably pushing things. He's a fantastic footballer. This isn't a football show. I think he's a fantastic footballer.
Yeah.
He's been brilliant for Liverpool, but he's got £20 million in the bank. And that's just one account, and he's got other companies as well. So he's been very successful on the basis of his career at Liverpool and elsewhere, of course, to date.
Yeah, fair play to him. I hope he stays. Actually, he's one that I love watching Mo Salah, except twice a season. Obviously, when I can't stand him. He's a brilliant footballer.
He's brilliant against us as well.
Yeah. By all accounts, he's a thoroughly decent chap as well. Thank you to everyone who's donated to the pod via our Patreon page. If you'd like to join them and make a small monthly contribution to the pod, that would be very kind of you. And you can do so by going to patreon.com/priceoffootball. If you pay the top dollar, £5 a month, you get to be an ultra. There you go. Some of you have always wanted to be an ultra. Some middle-class accountants out there going, I've always wanted to be an ultra. If you have a question you'd like answered on the show, email us at questions@priceoffootball.com. And finally, if you'd like to pre-order our new book, which I think we may have mentioned occasionally, Unfit and Improper Persons, An Idiot's Guide to Owning a Football Club, or one of our other books, or get yourself a Price of Football t-shirt, then go to our new look website at priceoffootball.com. We'll be back on Monday with a questions pod. In the meantime, I shall hand you over to Mr. Kieran Maguire for his customary farewell.
Well, thank you, everybody at Patreon, for the support you give to us, and everybody else that's been in contact. We do take it on board. We're recording this on Wednesday. I think this is National Colour Blindness Awareness Day, by the way.
Is it?
Which is why I'm wearing a black T-shirt, because I don't have too many problems with that.
Right. Are you sure you're wearing a black? You knew it was black when you put it on?
Well, if not, it's dark blue. Which is the same as black as far as I'm concerned.
Right.
But there's other ways that you can support the show. You can give us a review, by all accounts. According to Producer Guy, it helps us in the charts, helps us with algorithms. And I like algorithms. It doesn't matter what you say. So you could even say you would rather have the show presented by John Texter, part owner of Crystal Palace Football Club, and Den Hegarty of darts. I think... Mainly because he can go bong, and that's what I love Den Hegarty for.
Wow, that's a name from the. Was he the big one?
He was the big one, yeah.
Den Hegarty from. Oh my word, yeah. Mudwood's just down the road from us. Den Hegarty. I can't let this pod go, Kieran, without thanking our listener who pointed out what an opportunity we missed. We never miss many chances to crowbar in Smith's lyrics. That Brighton signed a player called Fatty, and we didn't. You didn't do it, Kieran. Would you like to rectify that omission now?
Well, yes. You're the one for me, Fatty, or Lip Up Fatty, of course, from Bad Manners was another alternative. Yes, that was a lost chance by me, and I'm ashamed of myself.
I know Brighton fans are not prone to singing, Kieran. It's at the odd choral evensong, I imagine. But I would love to see the whole of the Amex singing "You're the One for Me, Fatty." Bye, everybody.
Bye.
The Price of Football. The price of football.